The great black gates of the vampire highlands opened with a low growl, like the belly of some ancient beast. Cold winds swept across the stone courtyard as Fenric stepped inside. He wore a dark fur cloak over his shoulders, soaked from the snow of Ulver Hollow. His golden eyes scanned the crowd. Dozens of vampire nobles stood watching from the balconies above, their faces pale and silent. At the far end of the hall stood the throne, carved from obsidian and shaped like a pair of bat wings. Upon it sat Queen Alvaria, the vampire queen. Her beauty was sharp like a dagger. Pale skin, blood-red lips, eyes that could freeze rivers. She looked down at Fenric as if he were something to be studied or crushed. This was the day of the reproductive contract, a centuries-old agreement. Once every 100 years, the vampire queen would choose a mate from the allied clans, often a strong warrior or magical bloodline. The union was never about love. It was about power, survival, and the bloodline. Fenric had been chosen. A werewolf alpha from the north, tall, wild, and fierce. Many thought he would fall to the queen's charm or the promise of royal favor. Instead, he walked straight to the front of the court, stood before the altar, and picked up the scroll with the queen's seal on it. He didn't even read it. He looked straight at Alvaria and said, "You think I came here to be used like a breeding hound?" The silence was louder than thunder. Then, without hesitation, he ripped the scroll in half. The paper tore with a sharp sound. Gasps echoed around the court. Some vampires even hissed. One guard stepped forward, hand on sword, but the queen raised her hand. Her face showed no anger, only curiosity. "You know what this means?" she asked calmly. Fenric nodded. "It means I still have a choice, and I choose freedom. We don't bond through paper. We bond through trust, through fire." Alvaria rose from her throne. She stepped down slowly, each footstep tapping against the cold floor. She circled Fenric, her long gown brushing past him like a whisper. "You are brave," she said, voice soft, "but foolish. No one says no to the queen." Fenric met her gaze without fear. "Then maybe it's time someone did." The queen stopped in front of him. For a moment, the hall held its breath. No one moved. Then she smiled, not with warmth, but with interest. "Put him in the Seraphine chambers," she said to her guards. "Let's see how long that pride lasts." And just like that, Fenric was led away, unbroken, unafraid. The court whispered. The queen returned to her throne, and high above the castle, the blood moon watched silently. It had begun. Fenric was locked in a room unlike any prison he had ever seen. It was called the Seraphine Chambers, a place made not for pain, but for temptation. The walls were made of polished stone that shimmered like silver. The ceiling glowed softly with enchanted light, and the air smelled sweet, like wild roses mixed with something darker, something ancient. There were no chains, no whips, no fire. Just silence and waiting. Each evening, a vampire consort was sent to speak with him. Not with weapons or threats, but with soft voices and sweet words. They brought gifts, books, fruits soaked in honey, warm drinks in golden cups. Some tried to charm him with stories. Others tried to win him with music. One even danced. But Fenric never moved from his seat near the window. He stared out at the night, where the full moon hung like a glowing eye. He listened, sometimes even smiled, but his heart stayed still. He was a wolf, and wolves did not bow to beauty alone. Days passed, then weeks. The queen watched from afar. She received reports, grew curious, and finally decided to come herself. On the 14th night, the guards did not enter. No consort appeared. Instead, the door opened quietly, and Alvaria stepped inside. She wore a long gown the color of midnight. Her crown was gone. Her face was bare, but her presence filled the room like thunder in a quiet sky. Fenric turned. For the first time, his sharp gaze met hers, not in battle, but in silence. "You sent many voices," he said calmly, "but not your own." "I wanted to see if your pride would crack without me," she replied. It didn't. Alvaria walked across the room. Her fingers brushed along the stone table as she sat across from him. "You ripped a sacred contract," she said. "You should be ashes by now." Fenric gave a small smirk. "But I'm not. And you keep coming back." She didn't smile. But she didn't argue. There was a long pause. The wind whispered outside. The moonlight painted her face in silver. "You don't fear me," she said finally. "I don't fear what I understand," Fenric replied. "And I see more than most do. You wear your crown like armor, but it's not power that holds your kingdom together. It's loneliness." Her eyes narrowed, not with anger but surprise. No one spoke to her this way. No one dared. Alvaria leaned back, studying him. "Tell me, Wolf, what do you want?" He looked at her, then past her into the night sky. "I want what every beast craves," he said softly. "A reason to stop running." Their eyes met again. No hatred, no games. Just silence, deep and real. And in that quiet room, something unspoken passed between them. Not love, not yet, but understanding. And that was more dangerous than anything else. The Queen's visits became more frequent after that night. She didn't bring guards. She didn't bring gifts. Only questions. She sat across from Fenric, speaking less like a ruler and more like someone who had waited centuries to be heard. They talked about the old world, the wars between vampires and wolves, the treaties, the bloodlines, and the loneliness that followed all the power. "You speak like someone who's lived 100 lives," she said one evening. "I've lived in silence long enough to learn what words really mean," Fenric replied. The silence between them no longer felt heavy. It felt honest. But the bond growing between them did not go unnoticed. Whispers spread through the vampire court. Some nobles believed the Queen was losing her control. Others feared the werewolf's influence was a trick. But Alvaria had ignored them. She trusted what she saw in Fenric's eyes. Not weakness, not tricks, but truth. One night, the truth changed everything. A storm roared over the highlands. Wind beat against the tower walls. The flames in the chamber flickered wildly. Alvaria stood by the window, her eyes on the sky. Lightning lit up the clouds, and thunder followed like a heartbeat. "I was told my fate was written before I was born," she said. Fenric stepped beside her. "So was mine." She turned to face him, her voice quieter now. "The prophecy of the blood moon says 2 cursed souls will meet under one sky. Their bond will end one age and begin another." He looked at her carefully. "And you think that's us?" She didn't answer, but her eyes did. Slowly, without words, she stepped closer. The air between them was still, heavy, charged with something old. Fenric did not move. He waited. Then Alvaria placed her hand on his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, strong, steady, real. No vampire could feel that rhythm and not be changed by it. She leaned in. Their foreheads touched. Their breath became one. Then, gently, she kissed him. It wasn't a kiss of hunger. It wasn't a test. It was quiet, sure, and full of emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel for centuries. Fenric pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. "You kissed me," he said softly. "And you didn't stop me," she replied. "I wouldn't," he said. "But I should warn you. Wolves don't play with hearts. We guard them fiercely." Alvaria smiled. Not her cold royal smile, but a real one. The kind she had forgotten she could make. "I'm not afraid of your teeth," she said. "Good," he whispered, "because I only bear them for the ones I protect." Outside, the storm continued. But inside the chamber, something stronger than any curse was starting to grow. Not a deal. Not a duty. Something wild. Something true. The quiet between Fenric and Alvaria didn't last. Far from the tower, deep inside the vampire court, angry voices rose. The nobles had seen enough. They whispered of betrayal and weakness. Some even feared the prophecy was real. The prophecy that spoke of a union so powerful it could end the age of vampires. Lord Velthus, the Queen's most trusted advisor, gathered the court in secret. "She forgets who she is," he said. "We will remind her." A plan was made. Kill Fenric before his bond with Alvaria could grow stronger. Then blame the werewolves for an attempted attack. It would be war, and the queen would have no choice but to follow the old ways again. But someone overheard. One of Alvaria's silent spies, a shadow walker named Lyora, came to her in the night with the truth. "They're coming for him," she warned. "Tonight." Alvaria's heart pounded, a rare thing for a vampire queen. She rushed to Fenric's chamber without guards, her long cloak flying behind her like wings. "Get up," she said firmly, throwing open the door. Fenric blinked once. "Trouble?" "Too much to explain. We have to leave. Now." He stood quickly, sensing the urgency in her voice. They ran through the lower halls, dodging guards who had already turned against her. Arrows were fired, swords flashed, but the queen moved with speed only the oldest vampires could master. Fenric fought beside her, his strength breaking down doors and lifting her over broken stone. They reached a hidden passage behind the throne room, one only royal blood could open. "This tunnel leads to the wild forest," she said. "They won't follow us there." They descended into darkness, the torchlight flickering behind them. The air grew damp and cold. The tunnel walls were covered in ancient marks, symbols older than the vampires themselves. At last, they reached the forest's edge. Moonlight poured through the trees. Then howls. The wolves of Ulgar Hollow had come. But these weren't Fenric's pack. These were wild ones drawn by the scent of the queen. They didn't know him anymore. They'd only saw prey. Alvaria looked to Fenric. "Can you stop them?" He stepped forward, lifted his head, and let out a howl so deep and powerful it echoed through the entire forest. The trees bent. The wild wolves froze. And then they bowed. Alvaria stared, stunned. "They know you." "I was their alpha once," he said. "And maybe I will be again." She stepped beside him, breathing hard, her hair tangled, her gown torn. Yet in that moment she had never looked more alive. "I never imagined running from my own people," she said. "I never imagined protecting someone who wasn't one of mine," Fenric replied. "But here we are," she whispered. He nodded. "Together." And under the full moon, with danger behind them and the unknown ahead, the vampire queen and the werewolf warrior disappeared into the forest, no longer enemies. But something far more dangerous. Allies with a bond stronger than blood. The forest led them far from the vampire lands. For days, Alvaria and Fenric walked beneath tall trees and across frozen rivers. The sky above stayed quiet, and even the animals seemed to keep their distance. Something in the air felt sacred, like the world was holding its breath. Finally, they reached a quiet valley hidden deep between two mountains. At the center of it was a wide, still lake. Its waters were red, not with blood, but with the color of the soil below. The place felt ancient, powerful. "This is the Red Lake," Fenric said softly. "My people once believed it could hear prayers." Alvaria stepped closer to the shore, her eyes scanning the calm water. And what did the lake answer? "Only those who came with truth in their hearts." There, in a forgotten temple by the lake, they took shelter. Moss covered the stone walls, and vines wrapped around statues of forgotten gods. It was quiet, cold, but strangely peaceful. For the first time in years, both of them felt safe. That night, they lit a fire and sat close, their hands brushing without fear. No guards, no court, no duty, just the warmth of each other's presence. "We are being hunted," Alvaria said, "and I am no longer sure if I can go back." Fenric looked into the fire. "Neither can I. But maybe we were never meant to." She turned to him, her voice low. "There is an ancient right, lost to both our people, the right of fusion. It's not a law, not a contract. It's a bond that ties two souls, for life." Fenric didn't speak. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small vial of moon-blessed water, clear and shining. "You mean this?" he asked, holding it out. Alvaria's eyes widened. "Where did you get that?" "My mother left it for me. She said I'd know when the time was right. And now it was. They stood together in front of the lake under the stars. The wind was still. Fenric made a cut on his hand. Alvaria did the same. They let their blood mix into the moon water and then poured it into the lake. A light rose from the surface, soft, golden, and warm. They joined hands, repeating the old vow, not through fear, not through force, by choice, by truth. I bind my path to yours. As they spoke, the lake shimmered, and the ground beneath them pulsed with life. It was not magic for show. It was something real, something ancient. And then, Alvaria's eyes filled with tears, not from pain, but from a strange joy. She touched her stomach, surprised. Fenric stepped forward, his eyes full of wonder. What is it? She whispered, I think. I carry something now. Something new. The lake rippled again, as if to agree. That night, under stars older than any kingdom, the vampire and the werewolf made a bond that was not forced by law or tradition. It was love, and it was just beginning. Back in the Vampire Highlands, the court had changed. The queen was missing. The contract was destroyed, and Fenric, the werewolf, had escaped with her. The nobles were angry, scared. Lord Velthus stood before the council, his face cold and sharp. She has broken the ancient laws, he said. She is no longer fit to rule. He declared Queen Alvaria dead. In her place, he crowned himself regent, saying he would leave until a new ruler was chosen. The people obeyed, though whispers of doubt filled the halls. But Alvaria was not dead. Weeks later, the queen returned to her castle, cloaked and silent, with Fenric beside her. Her eyes burned with quiet strength. Her step was slow but certain. And her body had changed. She was not weak, but her skin held a new warmth. Her heart beat louder. Her senses were sharper, as though something new lived inside her. The guards gasped when they saw her. Velthus met her in the throne room. He smiled, but it was not a kind smile. You return like a ghost, he said. But this is no longer your court. Alvaria stepped forward. You betrayed me. I saved our people from your foolishness. You call love foolish, she asked. You call a life growing inside me a mistake. The court fell silent. Fenric moved beside her, but she raised her hand to stop him. Her eyes locked on Velthus. You tried to kill my mate, she said. And now you speak of honor? Velthus pulled a silver blade from his robe. You are not my queen anymore. In one breath, he moved to strike her. But he never touched her. Alvaria caught his arm with a strength that shocked even herself. With one swift move, she knocked the blade from his hand and lifted him off the floor. Her eyes were no longer red. They were glowing gold. I am not the queen you left behind, she said. I am something new. Then, with a final look, she threw Velthus across the room. He hit the wall with a crack and collapsed. He would live, but he would never rule again. Gasps echoed through the room. The nobles knelt, confused and afraid. Fenric walked forward and stood beside her. She is your queen, he said, and she carries the future. Alvaria placed her hand gently over her stomach. A future born of choice, of truth, not contracts. For the first time in vampire history, the court bowed not from fear, but from respect. That night, the old laws began to fade. A new story was starting, one written not in blood, but in bond. And in the quiet after the storm, the queen and her wolf stood at the edge of a new age, one they would face together, stronger than ever before. Dark clouds gathered over the Vampire Highlands. The air was heavy, the wind sharp. Inside the queen's tower, the fire burned low. Servants moved quickly and quietly. The castle walls echoed with worry. Queen Alvaria was in labor. The child inside her was not ordinary. It was not just vampire, not just wolf, but something new. Something ancient magic had never seen before. Fenric stood by her side, holding her hand tightly. He had faced monsters, storms, and swords, but nothing made his heart pound like this moment. He wiped the sweat from her forehead and whispered, "You're strong, stronger than any queen before." Alvaria gritted her teeth. "Then help me finish this." Outside the castle, battle had begun. Lord Velthus's loyal followers had refused to accept her return. They attacked with fire and silver, trying to destroy what they didn't understand. Vampire guards loyal to the queen defended the gates. Werewolves from Ulgar Hollow, called by Fenric's ancient howl, fought beside them. The ground shook from footsteps and clash of blades. But inside the tower, all that mattered was the child about to be born. Time passed slowly. Alvaria screamed, her voice raw but full of life. Her body trembled. Fenric held her, never letting go. And then, at the height of the storm, a cry echoed through the room. Not from pain, but from birth. A healer wrapped the baby in soft cloth and placed the child in Alvaria's arms. The queen stared down silent. No fangs, no fur, just a small face with silver eyes that glowed like moonlight. The child's presence filled the room with warmth and stillness, like the first breath after a storm. Fenric knelt beside them. "Is it?" "Yes," Alvaria whispered. "Ours." The healer stepped back, speechless. Even she had never seen a child like this. Word of the birth spread through the castle. Warriors paused in battle. Some dropped their weapons. A sound, soft and deep, rose from the sky. The blood moon appeared, bright and full. But it did not shine red. It turned gold. The prophecy had come true. A being born under love, not law. A bond that broke the curse of old bloodlines. A child of balance between night and wild. They called the child Lunaris, not vampire, not wolf, something greater. When Alvaria stepped onto the balcony, holding Lunaris in her arms, every creature, vampire, wolf, and human, looked up and felt something change. A queen reborn. A warrior father. A new line of rulers born not from fear, but from freedom. Fenric stood beside her, his arm wrapped around her waist. "We did this," he said, "together." Alvaria nodded, "And the world will never be the same." In the heart of a land torn by war and rule, a child had been born, not just to lead, but to unite. And under the golden moon, the age of bloodlines ended. The age of Lunaris had begun. 20 years had passed since the birth of Lunaris. The Vampire Highlands no longer looked like the cold, distant kingdom it once was. The stone walls had grown vines of silver leaf. The great halls echoed with laughter instead of fear. Both vampires and werewolves walked side by side, sharing stories, trading goods, and protecting one another. At the heart of the capital stood a statue, tall and graceful. It showed a wolf curled gently around a blooming rose. Below it, words carved in ancient script read, "Bound by choice, not chains." People came from faraway lands to see the queen who broke the contract and the werewolf who stood unshaken. But Alvaria and Fenric were no longer on the throne. They had left the kingdom 5 years after Lunaris was crowned heir. Some said they vanished into the Forest of Echoes to find peace. Others believed they crossed into the realm of spirits, holding hands as they stepped beyond time itself. No one truly knew. What remained was their story, and the child they left behind to lead. Lunaris had grown into a leader unlike any the land had ever seen. With their silver eyes and calm voice, Lunaris ruled with both strength and grace. They wore a crown of moonstone and fur, and carried no blade, only a staff carved from the red lake willow, a symbol of unity. Under Lunaris, the world began to change. The vampire clans stopped hunting the old way. The werewolf tribes opened their mountain paths to travelers. Even humans, once afraid of both races, now visited the highlands without fear. Warriors trained together. Healers shared secrets. Old wounds slowly began to heal. On every full moon, Lunaris stood at the top of the palace balcony and told the people the same thing. You were not born to follow old rules. You were born to build new ones. One night, as the wind whispered through the trees, Lunaris walked to the statue of their parents. They stood there for a long time, eyes soft, heart full. "I hope I've made you proud," Lunaris whispered. A breeze passed through the trees, warm and steady, like a hand resting gently on their shoulder. Behind them, 2 guards waited. "The people are ready, Your Grace," one said. Lunaris turned, smiled, and nodded. "Then let's not keep them waiting." That evening, under a sky filled with golden stars, the people of the Highlands gathered to celebrate the Day of the Bond, a new holiday marking the day Queen Alvaria and Fenric made their sacred choice. It was no longer just a story of love or rebellion. It was the beginning of a world where love was stronger than fear, and choice was greater than law. And as lanterns rose into the sky and music filled the air, the legacy of the vampire queen and the werewolf warrior lived on, not in blood, but in the hearts of those who dared to dream of peace.